watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I'm talking about watches. Today I want to discuss the 6R35 movement made by Seiko. And I wanted to do this because of this recent purchase that I've made of this Seiko Sumo, which inside here we have the 6R35 movement. Now when I bought this, it was the first 6R35 that I've owned, so I started doing a little bit of research on it, and I found it quite interesting, and I thought perhaps it'd be quite interesting if I share that information with you as well. And then I'd also want to then compare it against the 4R35 movement. Now this is not going to be too technical, this information. If you want to do a deep dive about the specifics of this from an engineering or a mechanical or a technical perspective, lots of information out there on Google. What I want to share with you today is just some general information, the sort of information that I like to know sort of off the top of my head, but without having that very in-depth sort of knowledge. Now this movement was released in 2019 and it has taken over from the previous generations of movements. It is a sort of mid-range tier Seiko movement. Not down the bottom, not up the top, it's sort of somewhere in between. And this one is used in the Presage watches, it is used in the Alpinist, and it is also used in some of the sort of slightly higher end Prospex range watches. Just some general information for you. It has 24 joules, it runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour, which is at 6 beats per second. It has a lovely long 70-hour power reserve. It hacks, it hand winds, and it has an hour, minute, and second hand with a date position at the 3 o'clock. It has an anti-magnetic rating of 60 Gauss, and they recommend if you are going to use the quick date set change, not to do it between 9 p.m. and 1 a.m. If you are going to flick through with that quick set, you need to move the hour hand away from that sort of range, that 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. before you start flicking through. Otherwise, there is the possibility for doing some damage to this movement. So what about the 4R movement? How are these 6R movements different to the 4R movements? Well, let's just think about these basic information that I've been telling you. Most of the things that I've mentioned are very similar in regards to 24 joules, the vibrations per hour, and ticks per second. However, this movement is Seiko's sort of entry-level mechanical movement. It is now used in all the Seiko 5 watches, and that is not to say that this is a basic or a bad movement. This movement is fantastic. It is a wonderful movement to have in your Seiko. It is also known as the NH35, which you may recognize. And I have had a lot of experience with these 4R movements and as well as the NH35 movements. So when Seiko puts one of these movements into their watches, they call it a 4R movement. When they produce these movements and sell it externally to other companies, they designate it as an NH movement. And you'll notice that a lot of companies are using this NH movement, both in China, being sold on AliExpress, as well as lots of micro brands. And it is a fantastic movement, and I've had a lot of experience with that movement. So let's talk about the differences between the 4R and the 6R movement. Beside the fact that the 4R movement has been around for an additional 8 years, having been released in 2011, there's really only two on-paper differences between the two. Now obviously there are big differences between the two technically, and I'm not really going to go into that. What I want to talk about is us as watch wearers. What are we actually experiencing on wrist? And what really is sort of on-paper differences between the two. Firstly is the stated accuracy. The stated accuracy of the 4R movement is plus 45 seconds to minus 35 seconds. Now that's quite a big range. That's over a minute. I've had lots of these movements and I can certainly say that I've never had one that is as bad as that, both positive or negative. The vast majority fit between sort of minus 4 seconds plus 12 seconds. That's my experiences with them. But they can even be significantly better than that as well. My San Martin vintage inspired Water Ghost, which has the NH35, it runs at about plus 3 seconds a week. And I think that is absolutely amazing. And I think any movement in any watch at any price point that runs at plus 3 seconds per week, you're going to be pretty happy with that, aren't you? Now the stated accuracy of the 6R movement is plus 25 seconds down to minus 15 seconds. And you can see now that's really a lot narrower than the 4R movement. Personally, in my own experiences with this one watch, this runs around about plus 5 seconds a day in real world applications. Unfortunately, I haven't had much experience with any other 6R movements, so I can't really give you any other real world applications of what the time is plus or minus. And probably the biggest difference between the movements is the power reserve. The 4R movement has a listed 40 hours of power reserve, which is quite a nice, comfortable amount of time to have a reserve on your watch. And it is quite a sort of a general time as well. If you look at a lot of different movements from different companies, that 38 to 40 hours is quite a sort of a normal, general amount of time. And with a watch that has a power reserve of that, it sort of gives you that opportunity to take it off at the end of the day, and the next morning it is definitely still going to be running, or the next day later on in the day, it is generally going to still be running as well. So from a general use, it is quite a usable power reserve range. The 6R movement, however, has a 70-hour power reserve, and that is significantly bigger, and really it is a slight game changer when it comes to wearing a mechanical watch. Now, as I said, this is the only one I have with a 6R movement, but my Longines also has a movement that has an 80-hour power reserve. And I've owned that watch for about 2 years now, and I can certainly say having that extra amount of time, that extra power reserve, is very useful and very usable. It's the kind of power reserve that you can wear the watch throughout the week, you can put it down on a Friday afternoon, and Monday morning when you pick it back up again, it's still ticking. And that's a really nice thing to have, to be able to go into your watch box, pick up a watch 2-3 days later, and for it to still be ticking. It's a nice feeling, and it saves you that tiny little bit of time sort of winding the watch up or resetting the date. Now, if you've got any experiences with this 6R35 movement, I'd love for you to leave a comment below and let me know what you think about them, and tell me about sort of what sort of accuracy you're getting out of them. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate everybody that takes the time to watch my videos. Alright, I'll see you again in the next one.